Both actors sat down, exchanging a brief handshake, too formal, too quick. The audience fell silent, waiting to see who would speak first. The cameras zoomed in, their lenses humming, capturing every micro-expression. Backstage, the director whispered into his headset, "Just don't let them start digging into each other." But deep down, everyone knew. When two giants like these share a stage, sparks are inevitable. De Niro leaned back in his chair, his gaze heavy, almost appraising. He cleared his throat and spoke first, his voice low, laced with a barely perceptible note of sarcasm. "So, Al, we're here to talk about our project, right? Supporting young talent, a noble cause?" He paused, his lips curling into a faint smile. "But, I can't help but ask, do you seriously think having kids at 83 is heroic? Or is it just a midlife crisis gone late?" A dead silence fell. The audience gasped. Someone nervously chuckled. The cameras swiveled sharply to Pacino, whose expression shifted in an instant. His smile faded, his eyes narrowed, and his fingers, which had been tapping the armrest, froze. Backstage, an operator whispered, "Wow, this just got real." The director cursed into his headset, "Damn it, Bob, we had an agreement." Pacino slowly leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Robert," he began, his voice calm but with a metallic edge. "You really want to start with that?" "Fine." He paused, letting the tension hang in the air. "I'm glad you're so concerned about my personal life. But tell me, Bob, your former assistant, didn't she say you yelled at her over some coffee? Is that your method acting, or are you just a tyrant by nature?" The audience erupted in a mix of gasps and applause. Someone in the back shouted, "Now that's a twist!" The cameras buzzed, capturing every movement. De Niro's jaw clenched, his eyes flared, while Pacino leaned back with a barely noticeable smirk, as if throwing down a gauntlet. The crew backstage froze, the director clutching his head, whispering, "This is a disaster." But the audience was electrified. The tension in the studio was palpable, like the calm before a storm. De Niro slowly leaned forward, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair. "You want to play this game, Al?" His voice was quiet, but each word cut like a knife. "Do you really think Jack and Jill with Adam Sandler didn't destroy your reputation for good? I mean, you were Michael Corleone, and now, what, a parody of yourself?" The room exploded with laughter, but it quickly died down as the camera caught Pacino's face. His eyes darkened, his lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Oh, Bob, you want to talk about reputation?" he retorted, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "How about Dirty Grandpa? Now people recognize you more as a meme than a cinematic legend. Was that your plan, or just career suicide?" The studio buzzed, the audience unable to contain their emotions. Some whistled, others clapped. The cameras hummed. Zooming in on both actors, their gazes locked like two boxers before a punch. Backstage, the director shouted into his headset, "Cut to commercial now!" But the operators just shook their heads. This show was too gripping to stop. The tension in the studio became unbearable, the air crackling with mutual hostility. De Niro clenched his fists, his face stone-like, while Pacino leaned back, his eyes burning with defiance. Both knew there was no backing down, and this was just the beginning. De Niro, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened, slowly leaned back in his chair. His cold gaze never left Pacino, and when he spoke, his voice was low and sharp, like a whip's crack. "You know, Al, you've always been a master of drama," he said, his lips curling into a sarcastic smile. "But tell me, how much did you pay your exes to keep quiet? Or did you just run out of money after all those lawsuits?" The audience gasped. Someone in the back rows shouted, "Ooh, that's harsh!" The camera swung sharply to Pacino, whose face froze for a moment as if struck. His eyes narrowed, and his fingers, still resting on the armrest, gripped the leather tightly. Backstage, an operator whispered, "This isn't an interview anymore, it's a war." Pacino slowly leaned forward, his voice trembling with suppressed rage but retaining that charismatic tone that once held millions spellbound on screen. "Robert, you really want to dig into the dirt?" he said, his eyes flashing. "Fine, let's play." They say you take any movie because legal alimony ate up your fortune. Is that true, Bob? Or can you just not say no to a bad script? The room erupted in a mix of laughter and shouts. Some clapped, others whistled, as the cameras buzzed, capturing De Niro's reaction. His face darkened, his brows furrowed, and his lips pressed into a thin line. Backstage, the director clutched his head, whispering, "We're losing control." But the audience was in ecstasy. This wasn't just a show, it was a clash of titans, and no one wanted to miss a single blow. De Niro shot forward, his fingers pointing at Pacino accusingly. "You're talking about scripts, Al?" His voice was piercing, each word landing like a hammer. "What about you suing your own agent over your fee for 88 minutes? How much did they have to beg you to act without getting offended?" The audience roared. Someone shouted, "Hit him, Bob!" Pacino leaned back, his face a mix of anger and bitter irony. He slowly shook his head, as if in disbelief at what he'd heard. "Oh, Bob, you really went there," he said, his voice quiet but dangerously calm. "And what about your irony? You call Trump a disgrace to the nation, but you act like a dictator on set. Is that your way of showing morality?" The studio exploded. The audience was on its feet, some clapping, others shouting, as the cameras buzzed, zooming in on the actors, their gazes locked in a deadly duel. Backstage, the director yelled, "Cut to commercial, please." But the operators just shook their heads. It was too captivating to stop. The tension reached a boiling point, and everyone felt something irreparable was about to happen. De Niro clenched his fists, his eyes blazing. "You were out union without a role, Al," he said, his voice slow and venomous, "because no one was calling you, or because you were too busy suing someone again." It was a low blow, and the audience gasped, sensing a line had been crossed. The camera swung to Pacino, whose face froze for a moment, but then his eyes flared, and he stood from his chair, his presence radiating the same energy that once made Tony Montana unforgettable. "Enough, Robert," Pacino said, his voice low but thundering through the studio. The audience fell silent, the cameras froze, and the crew backstage held their breath. "You want to talk about my career, my life? Fine, but let's talk about what you do. You stand here throwing dirt, accusing me of ageism, lawsuits, and role choices. But what about you, Bob? You belittle the people who work for you, call it method. You star in comedies that disgrace your legacy and call it work. You stand here judging my choices, but who gave you the right?" Pacino took a step forward, his eyes burning, his voice gaining strength. "I'm 83 and I live the way I want. I love, I create, I take risks. And you? You're scared, Bob. Scared of aging, scared of being forgotten, scared that your lawsuits and scandals are all that's left of you. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of my mistakes. Jack and Jill? Yeah, I did it, so what? I experimented, I lived. You hide behind your serious image, but everyone sees you're just angry at the world." The audience erupted in applause, someone shouting, "Al, you're the king!" The cameras buzzed, capturing every gesture as Pacino turned to the audience, arms outstretched, as if addressing them all. "We're here to support young actors, to give them the chance we once craved. But how can we do that when people like you, Bob, disrespect those who don't fit your standards? Ageism, sexism, judgment. That's not about art, it's about fear. And I'm not playing that game." De Niro, still seated, slowly stood. His face was stone-like, but a flicker of uncertainty passed through his eyes. "You done, Al?" he said, his voice quiet but trembling with anger. "You think you can stand here and lecture me? I fought for every role, every film, I don't hide, I work. And you? You live in a world where everyone's supposed to applaud you just for existing." But his words were drowned out by the audience's roar, now firmly on Pacino's side. The cameras caught the moment De Niro pursed his lips, his gaze darting between Pacino and the crowd. Pacino, sensing his advantage, turned to him, his voice calm but cutting. "Robert, I respect your legacy, but respect is a two-way street. You want respect? Start with yourself, and stop judging others for how they live." With that, Pacino turned, gave a brief glance to the cheering audience, and strode off the stage. His walk was confident, though his eyes betrayed a hint of weariness. The cameras followed him as the crowd stood, applauding. De Niro remained on stage, his face impassive, but his hands trembled. Backstage, the director shouted, "Cut the feed!" But it was too late. The show had gone viral before it even ended. Social media erupted in chaos. Hashtags, Team Pacino and De Niro down flooded X, with users sharing clips of Pacino's speech, calling it a masterclass in dignity. Al Pacino just destroyed ageism in front of millions, one user wrote. Another added, De Niro looked like a bitter old man who can't handle someone else's success. Memes from Dirty Grandpa flooded the internet, but this time they mocked De Niro, not Pacino. The ratings for Unfiltered skyrocketed, but De Niro's reputation took a hit. The media dissected his words, accusing him of ageism and hypocrisy. His PR team worked around the clock, but the damage was done. Pacino, on the other hand, became a hero. His speech sparked discussions about respect for personal choices and fighting prejudice. Their charity project gained massive support, raising millions in donations within days. While De Niro stayed out of the spotlight, Pacino appeared at several events, greeted as a triumph. His words about dignity and art were quoted in articles and posts, and a new generation of actors called him an icon unafraid to be himself. The clash on Unfiltered became a turning point, not just for their careers, but for a culture rethinking what it means to be a legend in an era of change.